On the dark morning of March 8, 2014, a plane took off from the Kuala Lumpur International Airport in Malaysia. Sadly, the plane would never make it to its destination of the Beijing Capital International Airport. But what happened to the plane? Where did it go? Join us today as we discuss the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. All right, everyone, welcome back to
Unknown,
Unsolved,
Unseen,
Triple U.
Woohoo!
Yes.
Episode 50.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Halfway to 100.
Halfway to 100, and we're just going to be celebrating an entire year of the podcast in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, we have some pretty good episodes coming up, so you'll have to, everybody stay tuned. Come back for them.
We just gotta have the time to record where Atlas is not being a little crazy.
Yeah, so sorry this episode's coming out a little late. We had the holiday weekend, as well as some other stuff that we were doing, which just made our weekend go crazy. And obviously we have a puppy, so he likes to be crazy too.
Mm-hmm. All right, so just for quick announcements, once again, check out the other podcasts we've been promoting. I don't think we're going to have a promotion audio this time because of time constraints and technical difficulties we've been having. Check our page for any other announcements on Instagram, and that's about all that I have right now. Oh yeah, I'm Frank.
I'm Sage. We're the hosts, obviously.
Yep.
So, we're discussing the Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 disappearance. So with that, we do have a few trigger warnings. It was kind of hard to pinpoint exactly what trigger warnings to put, so I just kind of put broader topics. So I have discussion of plane crashes, because that for me is a scary thought. Discussion of a potential murder-suicide plot, as well as a very significant loss of life. So if those are things that you don't want to hear about, then we will see you next week for episode 51. So Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, also known as MH370 or MAS370, was an international passenger flight of a Boeing 777 operated by the Malaysia Airlines that was traveling from the Kuala Lumpur International Airport in Malaysia to the Beijing Capital International Airport in China, and it left Malaysia shortly after midnight.
How long was this flight supposed to be?
I believe the flight was supposed to only be a couple of hours, because from Malaysia to China is not super far.
Yeah, it's not far at all.
Yeah. So all was tracking well until suddenly the flight veered from its scheduled path and turned west across the Malay Peninsula. The flight was tracked by Malaysian military tracking radar, taking a sharp turn over the South China Sea as it headed toward the Strait of Malacca, and then changed altitude and flew as low as 12,000 feet. For reference, cruising altitude for planes averaged between 30,000 and 42,000 feet. So for it to be in the middle of a flight and go down to 12,000 feet is pretty concerning. Reports indicate that the aircraft's ACARS system, which is the Aircraft Communications Addressing and Reporting System, basically it's a communication system between the aircraft and ground stations, but it's for like shorter lengths. Like it's not obviously not like phone call type, it's more like what you're used to hearing about whenever you hear like the
radio.
Yeah. Or through a satellite. But it stopped transmitting around 1:21 a.m. on March 18th, about 2 minutes after the pilot's last verbal communication came to the ground command. So this is only just over an hour after this flight takes off.
Okay.
At approximately 2:40 a.m., UTC, which I had to look up, is Coordinated Universal Time. So it's the primary time standard used globally to regulate time and clocks, which I didn't know was a thing. So that's actually pretty neat. So it's 2:40 a.m. UTC. The the flight lost contact with the Subang air traffic control and then disappeared over Vietnam controlled airspace. So the Subang air traffic control is part of Malaysia's air traffic control. And as it entered into Vietnam controlled airspace, they no longer had contact with it. In Marsat, a British satellite operator was able to show that the MH30 or 370 continued to ping for at least 6 hours after it left the Malaysian airspace, indicating that the plane continued to fly. However, Chinese officials confirmed that the aircraft never entered Chinese airspace. So where did it go in all of those hours?
That's a good question.
Yeah. So some officials believe that it may have crashed somewhere in the southern Indian Ocean after running out of fuel, but an expansive search effort over the years has returned no answers, no victims, and no plane.
Do you remember when this happened?
Yeah, I do. It was crazy.
Because it was a big story and everyone was trying to figure it out for better part of a year, and then it kind of faded out after they got really nothing.
Yeah, I do remember that. It definitely made me very nervous to ride planes in my couple vacations I took planes on in high school. And by a couple, I mean one, to Disney. But the cause of the disappearance has not been determined, obviously, due to the lack of evidence. And it is widely regarded as one of, if not the greatest mystery in aviation history.
Greater than Amelia Earhart?
Yeah. If the official, because I think it's due to loss of life.
Okay.
If the official assumption is confirmed, Flight 370 was, at the time of its disappearance in 2014, the deadliest aviation incident in the history of Malaysia Airlines, surpassing the 1977 hijacking and crash of the Malaysian airline system Flight 653 that killed all 100 passengers and crew aboard, and the deadliest involving a Boeing 77, surpassing the Asiana Airlines Flight 214 that only had 3 fatalities.
That's multiple different incidents, though.
Yeah.
Bigger list than I thought you were about to give.
Yeah. There was, honestly, in looking at the data, I think there's only really been like 7 flights of either, like, I think I go into it later, but either Malaysia Airlines or the Boeing 777 that, like, in the history of their existence, only like 7 or 8 flights have crashed. But with 227 passengers and 12 crew members, Flight MH370's disappearance and subsequent presumption of death, because we haven't found anybody, so we would assume they're dead, would remain the single deadliest case of aircraft disappearance. And it was also the deadliest, again, involving a Boeing 777. And it was the deadliest flight of 2014 and the deadliest flight in Malaysia Airlines history until it was surpassed in all 3 of those categories by the Malaysia Airlines Flight 17. Flight 17 was shot down by Russian-backed forces while flying over Ukraine on July 17th of 2024.
I was about to ask, wasn't there another...
Oh, no, 2014. Sorry.
Yeah, and that one was crazy because it was definitely Russian-backed separatist. And however, Russia will claim it was Ukraine who did it, which was clearly not. But don't worry, those war criminals who did this get protection from the get protection provided to them from the Russian government.
Gross. Yeah, it was July 17th, 2014. I had the date wrong, sorry. Yeah. It was only 4 months after Flight 370 was lost.
Yeah,
so it held the titles for 4 months until that plane was
Malaysian Airlines were not having a good year that year.
No, it was a bad year for them. So we're going to break it down just a little bit more. It will get a little bit more technical, but I think you kind of need the pieces of technical information in order to understand why it's so interesting that this plane basically disappeared off the face of the earth. Sorry if it gets boring, but to me it was very interesting because I don't know much about planes. So Flight 370 was a Boeing 777-2H6ER with a serial number of 28420, registered as a 9M-MRO. These are important numbers because those are that helps identify pieces of the plane.
Yeah, if they find wreckage.
Yeah. So the aircraft had been operated by Malaysia Airlines since May 21st, 2002. So it had been in use for about 12 years at this point. And it was powered by two Rolls-Royce Trend 892 engines. Which I didn't know Rolls-Royce made engines for planes.
They make aircraft equipment too.
I did not know that.
Oh, I knew that.
So neat. It could carry up to 282 passengers in total capacity, including the crew, though it wasn't a completely full flight when it disappeared. With over 53,000 flight hours and 7,500 takeoffs and landings, and not being involved in any major incidents prior, it was assumed that the flight was in good working order. A maintenance check was carried out on February 23rd, 2014, so about 2 weeks prior to the plane taking off, was found to be in compliance with all applicable airworthiness directives for the airframe and the engines. A replenishment of the crew oxygen was performed on March 7th, 2014, so the day prior to flight takeoff, and nothing again was found to be unusual at this check as well. However, 10 years after the disappearance of the flight, leaked documents have shown that the MH370 was given supplemental fuel and crew member oxygen supplies just before takeoff. This is considered to be related to either operational or safety needs, including having a fuel reserve for the journey in case the flight would be extended somehow. It's also possible that it's related to making the plane the proper weight for taking off, because planes have to be a specific weight for what they're designed to carry in order to make sure that they're able to fly the way that they're designed to fly. So if it's only carrying about 240-ish people, 239, that's 40 people less. And that's 40 people's luggage less than what it could carry. So while Boeings and Boeing 77s in particular have been around since 1994 and have had an excellent safety record, I don't, wink, wink. I'm not about to call out Boeing.
Well, 747s, I believe, have the issue, right?
I think so, but Boeing sued me, so.
Well, you're not a whistleblower. You're just somebody who isn't a whistleblower.
I just read the internet. There have been 7 other hull losses, which I think is the entire plane as a whole. But I said if I had a nickel for every time a Boeing crashed, I'd have 8 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened that many times. At least for the Boeing 777 or 777. So the crash of British Airways Flight 38 in 2008, a cockpit fire in a parked Egypt Air Flight 667 at the Cairo International Airport in 2011, the crash of the Asiana Airlines Flight 214 in 2013, in which 3 people were killed. That's what I spoke about earlier. The Malaysia Airlines Flight 17, again, which was shot down over Ukraine, and it killed all 298 people on board, and that was July 2014, so again, about 4 months after. The Emirates Flight 521, which crashed and burned out while landing at Dubai International Airport in August 2016, killing only 1 person. And in November 2017, the 7th Boeing 77 hull loss occurred when a Singapore Airlines 777-200ER was written off after catching fire and burning out at a Singapore Shanghai airport. So, in all reality, the 2 flights in 2014 are the flights with the most significant amounts of death. All of the other ones are just a few people or just the plane as a whole.
And of those 2 in 2014, one of them was shot down, so no fault of the plane itself.
Exactly.
Completely the fault of killers.
Yep. So the passengers. So again, at the time of the disappearance, the plane was carrying 12 Malaysian Airlines crew members and 227 passengers from 14 different nations. All 12 crew members, which consisted of the 2 pilots and 10 cabin crew or flight attendants, were Malaysian citizens. The main pilot was 52-year-old Captain Zahari Ahmed Shah from Penang. He had been a pilot for Malaysia Airlines since 1981 and became a second officer with the airline in 1983, and then became a captain of the Boeing 737-400 in 1991, captain of the Airbus A330-300 in 1996, and then finally captain of the Boeing 777-200 in 1998. He had been a type rating instructor and a type rating examiner since 2007 and had a total of 18,365 hours of flying experience, which is a lot of time to fly.
Okay, so that's a lot of time comparative to other pilots. Is that a lot of time?
That's a lot of
Okay.
time. I mean, if you think about it, like how many days that is between 1981 to 2014 at the time of this disappearance, that's a lot of hours.
All right.
That's a lot of hours. The co-pilot was 26-year-old First Officer Farid Abdul Hamid. He joined Malaysia Airlines as a cadet pilot in 2007. After becoming a second officer of the Boeing 737-400, he was then promoted to first officer of the 737-400 in 2010, transitioned to the Airbus A330-300 in 2012. And then in November of 2013, so just a couple months before this flight, he began training as first officer of the Boeing 777-200 aircraft. Flight 370 was his final training flight, and he was scheduled to be examined on his next flight for being able to officially pilot, which is really sad. He had accumulated 2,763 hours of flying experience. So if you think about the ability to be able to become captain with less than 3,000 hours, and then our actual captain has almost 18,500. That's like a pretty considerable difference between like when you start and where that guy was at. The aircraft was carrying, like I said, 12 Malaysian crew members, 227 passengers from 14 different nations. On the day of the disappearance, Malaysia Airlines released the names and nationalities of the passengers and crew based on the flight manifest. The passenger list was later modified to include 2 Iranian passengers who were traveling on stolen Austrian and Italian passports. That comes into play later. Of the 227 passengers, 153 were Chinese citizens, which included a group of 19 artists with 6 family members and 4 staff, who were returning from a calligraphy exhibition of their work in Kuala Lumpur, which is just very innocent.
Yeah.
38 passengers were Malaysian, and remaining passengers, which was 36, were from 12 different countries. I didn't really get a list of all 12, but it's safe to say the majority were Chinese, the next was Malaysian, and then the rest was a couple from each of the other 12 countries.
Makes sense on nationalities.
Yeah.
Nothing to be surprised about there, really, besides the 2 Iranians who were on stolen passports.
Yep. It was also carrying 31,517 pounds of cargo, which, like, is not the actual amount that it can carry. Like, I forget how much it is that it can carry, but that just seems like a lot.
I mean, it is a heavy weight.
Yeah. So let's break down the nitty-gritty of the flight disappearance. Obviously, I wrote some of it earlier in the introduction, but I'm going to give a more detailed timeline here. And I also want to make it known that I did my best to write out the timeline in the right order, but there's a lot of information on this flight missing, or like a lot of information about the disappearance of this flight. So some stuff, it's possible, could be a little bit jumbled, as there's information coming from multiple different countries on their understanding and experience with the flight. So translations can go off, can be off and things like that. So just putting that disclaimer out there. So again, Flight 370 was a scheduled flight in the early morning of Saturday, March 8th, 2014, from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia to Beijing, China. It was one of 2 daily flights operated by Malaysia Airlines from its hub at Kuala Lumpur International Airport to the Beijing Capital International Airport. It was scheduled to depart at 12:35 local time and arrive at 6:30 local time. I don't know if there's a time change between like where it was landing in China and Malaysia. I'm not 100% sure. So I don't think so, but I just put it out there. So the planned flight duration was 5 hours and 34 minutes. That would indicate that it was likely not, there's no time change, but it was also expected to consume about 82,000 pounds of jet fuel, which cannot melt steel beams.
Yeah, but it can weaken them.
Again. The aircraft carried 108,200 pounds of fuel, including reserves, allowing an endurance of 7 hours and 31 minutes. So the flight could go about 2 hours longer than what it was scheduled to if it needed to with the amount of fuel that was on there. The extra fuel was enough to divert to alternate airports. The Jinan, I'm sorry about my pronunciation. These are Chinese, and I can't say that I'm well versed in how to pronounce their words with an English twist. So I think it's Jinan Yaoqing International Airport and Hangzhou Zhoushan International Airport. Again, sorry if I butchered that. That would require an extra 10,600 pounds to about 24,000 pounds of fuel, thus making it understandable that the plane was given fuel reserves before its takeoff. So that was something that was questioned previously, but there's an explanation. So it did leave a few minutes late. It took off from runway 32R at 12:42 local time, so about 7 minutes after it should have left, and was cleared by air traffic control to gain altitude to 18,000 feet. Voice analysis has determined that the first officer communicated with the ATC, which is air traffic control, while the flight was on the ground, and the captain communicated with ATC after the flight took off. Shortly after departure, the flight was transferred from the airport's air traffic control to the Lumpur radar, and that's where it could speak over that ACAR system. So the air traffic control over the peninsular Malaysia and adjacent waters is provided by the Kuala Lumpur Area Control Center, so the ACC. And at 12:46 local time, so about 4 minutes after taking off, the flight reached an altitude of approximately 35,000 feet. At 1:01, Flight 370's crew reported to the Lumpur radar that they had reached the 35,000 feet. And then they confirmed again at 1:08 local time. I put the quotes here. The Lumpur radar says Malaysian 370 contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night. And the flight responded, good night, Malaysian 370. So I do believe this was the last verbal word said over the control before the flight disappeared. The aircraft's final transmission before its disappearance from radar was an automated position report using the ACAR system and was sent at either 1:06 or 1:22 local time. I saw both in multiple different articles, so I'm not sure, but that's like a considerable difference.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. Among the data provided in this message was that the total fuel remaining was 96,600 pounds, so they'd only used about 12,000 pounds of fuel in the 40 or so minutes that they were in the air. And again, the last verbal signal to air traffic control occurred at 1:19 local time when the flight was over the South China Sea. At 1:20 local time, Flight 370 was observed on radar at the Kuala Lumpur ACC as it passed the navigational waypoint Igari in the Gulf of Thailand. And then 5 seconds later, the mode S symbol disappeared from the radar screens, letting them know that the flight was no longer on radar. At 1:21, the Flight 370 disappeared from the radar screen at the Kuala Lumpur ACC.
Now, did it disappear from radar for mysterious purposes, or was it that it was out of range of radar in these two?
There's like speculation of both.
Okay, because like your radar obviously has a range, so I didn't know if this was
Yeah.
it's out of range now, so it's no longer a problem, or that it dipped too far down and now it's out of radar.
Yeah, there is multiple different radars following this from different countries, each of which at one point noted that it disappeared off their radar. So by 1:22 local time, the aircraft was lost from the air traffic control's secondary surveillance system. A civilian primary radar at the Sultan Ismail Petra Airport that had a 69-mile range made 4 detections of an unidentified aircraft between 1:30 and 1:52. The tracks of the unidentified aircraft are, quote, consistent with those of the military data, because I will go into it, but the Malaysian military ends up is able to also track all of the flights, which makes sense because of airspace.
It said unidentified. Maybe it's a UFO.
Could be. At 1:38, at 1:38, the Ho Chi Minh Area Control Center contacted Kuala Lumpur Area Control Center to figure out what was going on, like the whereabouts of Flight 370, and informed them that they had not yet established any verbal communication with Flight 370. So, and at that point, the last detected radar for that by the Chinese control center happened at the waypoint of Baitod. The two centers exchanged 4 more calls during the next 20 minutes with no new information. And again, 1:52 Flight 370 was detected passing just south of the island of Penang. And from there, the aircraft flew across the Strait of Malacca, and at 2:03, Kuala Lumpur ACC relayed to the Ho Chi Minh ACC, indicating that they had received from Malaysia Airlines Operations Center Flight 370 and that it was in Cambodian airspace. So we went from Malaysia to Vietnam to Cambodia.
That is a lot of different airspaces to be in.
Yes.
Oh, that is a lot of different airspaces to be in.
Yeah. Ho Chi Minh ACC contacted the Malaysian ACC twice in the following 8 minutes, asking for confirmation that Flight 370 was in Cambodian airspace. At 2:15, the watch supervisor at the Malaysian ACC reached out to the Malaysia Airlines Operations Center, which said that it could exchange signals with Flight 370. And again, Flight 370 was in Cambodian airspace, so that they could confirm that. The Kuala Lumpur ACC contacted the Ho Chi Minh ACC to ask whether the planned flight path for Flight 370 was to pass through Cambodian airspace, and they responded saying that it was not supposed to enter Cambodian airspace and that they had already contacted the Phnom Penh ACC, that's the Cambodian airspace control center, which had no communications with Flight 370. It was tracked by the Malaysian military's primary radar system for roughly another hour, though they realized that the plane was deviating sharply westward from its planned northeastern flight path, crossing the Malay Peninsula and leaving the range of the military radar at 2:22 local time over the Andaman Sea, 200 nautical miles northwest of the Penang Island in northwestern Malaysia. Based on contact with the operations center at 2:34, in contact with from the plane, the automated contact from the plane, they were informed that at that time Flight 370 was in normal condition because it had a typical signal download and its location was not normal, but it was in normal condition, so there was no reason to be concerned. At that point, maybe the pilot was like, okay, I gotta move around. I don't know, storm or something. I didn't read much about the weather.
Okay, yeah, I don't remember much being said about the weather during the disappearance.
As mentioned previously, The crew were expected to signal air traffic control in Ho Chi Minh City as the aircraft passed into Vietnam airspace, which would have been just north of where the contact was lost with the flight.
Where's he at?
So it was actually Malaysia to Cambodia to Vietnam. Sorry, I had the order wrong. Sometime after the final ACARS transmission at 1:06, the satellite communication system aboard the aircraft went offline, which could be due to a power interruption. That's not that uncommon. And it remained offline during the plane's initial deviation from its scheduled flight path.
So did it come back on though?
It did. For an unknown reason, at 2:25, the aircraft satellite communication system came back on and sent a log-on request message. This was the first message since the ACARS transmission at 1:06, which was relayed by satellite to a ground station, both operated by the telecommunications company Inmarsat. After logging onto the network, the satellite data unit aboard the aircraft responded to hourly status requests from Inmarsat for the next 6 hours and 2 ground-to-aircraft telephone calls at 2:35 and 7:13 local time, but both were unanswered by the cockpit. The captain of another aircraft attempted to contact the crew of Flight 370 shortly after 1:30 a.m., using the International Air Distress Frequency to relay that Vietnamese air traffic control's request for the crew to contact them. But the captain said he was able to establish communication, but only heard mumbling and static at that time. So
That's interesting, mumbling at least.
Yeah. At 3:30, Malaysia Airlines Operations Center informed the Kuala Lumpur ACC that the locations it had provided earlier were based on flight projection, but were not actually reliable for aircraft positioning. So there had been, over the next hour, no contact from the plane stating that they had they had signaled Chinese air traffic control. And at 5:09, the Singapore ACC was asked for information about Flight 370. At 5:20, an undisclosed official contacted the Kuala Lumpur ACC requesting information about Flight 370. He opined that, based on the known information, he believes that the flight never left Malaysian airspace, which would be weird because it's pinged in at least 2 other airspaces, which is Cambodia and Vietnam. So we can safely assume that it left the airspace, but that's Singapore. The watch supervisor at the Kuala Lumpur ACC activated the Kuala Lumpur Aeronautical Rescue Coordination Center, or the ARC, at 5:30, more than 4 hours after communication was lost with Flight 370. The ARC is a command post at an area control center that coordinates search and rescue activities when an aircraft is lost. That the timeline of search will come into play later.
Okay.
Sorry, I know this is very technical.
Yeah, it's a little more technical. I'm more waiting for the theories.
I know that I do have that towards the end, but I found this fascinating that there's this much information about its transmissions and things like that, and yet we have no idea where this plane is.
Yeah, I mean, planes are very technical. There's a lot of, you always gotta know what planes are in the air, how close they are to government airspaces, and all that stuff. So, of course, all this information exists.
Yeah. The final transponder data indicated the aircraft was flying at its assigned cruise altitude of 35,000 feet and was traveling at about 542 miles per hour true airspeed. I don't know what that means, but with few clouds around at this point and no rain or lightning nearby, according to the Inmarsat satellite, that satellite was in geostationary orbit over the Indian Ocean and received hourly signals from the flight until its last signal, when the flight status request and aircraft acknowledgement occurred at 8:10. About 1 hour and 40 minutes after the flight was scheduled to arrive in Beijing. The aircraft sent a log-on request again at 8:19, which was followed after a response from the ground station by a log-on acknowledgement message at 8:19, about 10 seconds later. The log-on acknowledgement is the last piece of data ever received from Flight 370. The aircraft did not respond to a status request from the satellite at 9:15, and at this time, it was estimated the flight still had maybe 90,000 pounds of fuel when it disappeared from secondary radar. So at this point, it's past the time The flight was supposed to land, and there's no more signals coming from it at all. So countries in that area were reluctant to release information collected from their military radars because of the sensitivity about revealing their own military capabilities.
That is a very fair point.
Yes. So Indonesia has an early warning radar system, but its ATC radar did not register any aircraft within the transponder code, or with the transponder code used by Flight 370, despite the aircraft possibly having flown near or over the northern tip of Sumatra in Indonesia. They did track the flight earlier when it was en route to the waypoint Agari before the transponder was thought to be turned off, but they did not provide any information on whether or not they had detected it after it had been turned back on. Thailand and Vietnam also detected Flight 370 on radar before the transponder stopped working. The radar position symbols for the transponder code used by Flight 370 vanished after the transponder is thought to have been turned off again. Like another time that it vanished after being turned off. Vietnam's Deputy Minister of Transport, Phan Quay Thieu, stated that Vietnam had noticed MH370 turning back toward the west and that its operators had twice informed Malaysian authorities on the day of the flight, March 8th. So Vietnam is saying, hey, we told Malaysian authorities that this flight was veering very far to the west. And it's up to them to decide. Thai military radar detected an aircraft that may have been Flight 370, but it's not known at the time at what time the last radar contact was made. And the signal that was made did not include any identifying data, therefore we don't actually know if that was the flight. The flight was also not detected by Australia's conventional system or its long-range Joint Over-the-Horizon radar system, which has a range of 1,900 miles.
Is this within 1,900 miles?
Yes.
Okay.
The latter, though, was not in operation on the night of the disappearance of the plane.
So Australia's long distance was not?
Yeah.
Okay.
So sometime after the final ACARS transmission at 1:06, Malaysia Airlines issued a media statement at 7:24 local time, shortly after the second call from Inmarsat went unanswered by the plane, and 1 hour after the scheduled arrival time of the flight at the Beijing Capital International Airport in China. They reported that the communication with the flight had been lost by Malaysian air traffic control at 2:30, and the government had initiated search and rescue operations. The time, though, was later corrected to 1:21 when communication was lost, not 2:30. It was actually an hour and 9 minutes earlier. At the time of the media statement, and unbeknownst to investigators, the flight was still airborne at this time, and the search and rescue operations were started while the plane was still in flight over the Indian Ocean. So they're doing search and rescue operations initially focused in the South China Sea, because that's where they believed the flight would have been traveling because of its scheduled flight path. But records of signals sent between the aircraft and communication satellite over the Indian Ocean revealed that the plane had continued flying for almost 6 hours after its final sighting on the Malaysian military radar. So the general consensus among investigators is the flight actually crashed somewhere in the southern Indian Ocean sometime between 8:19 and 9:15 on March 8th due to fuel exhaustion. Although the exact time and location of the crash will forever remain uncertain unless we happen to find more pieces of it. Neither the crew nor the aircraft's communication system relayed any kind of distress signal, indications of bad weather, or any technical problems before the aircraft vanished from radar screens. An aviation attorney, Mary Schiavo, in a CNN report said, "If we have a scenario where something happened, the plane made a dramatic turn and dropped from 35,000 feet to 12,000 feet. This scenario would fit what a pilot would do in the event of a catastrophic onboard event, such as a rapid decompression, a fire, or an explosion. That's what you have to do. Descend, get down, turn around, and try to get back to an airport that can accommodate an ailing plane." So, doesn't seem quite out of the ordinary that the flight would drop drastically in its altitude. It could be from that. There's other theories that involve that, though. On March 24th, 2014, Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak appeared before media at 10 p.m. local time to give a statement regarding Flight 370, during which he announced that he had been briefed by the Air Accidents Investigation Branch that it and the Inmarsat satellite had concluded that the airliner's last position before it disappeared was over the southern Indian Ocean. So it was initially speculated, now they've confirmed it.
So in the southern Indian Ocean, obviously that's a wide area you're talking about. How many miles or kilometers from the nearest piece of land?
So they said that there are no places that exist in the southern Indian Ocean where it could have landed with what fuel it had left.
Yep.
So however many miles, I don't know the exact nautical miles. But so the general consensus is that it crashed into the sea and was assumed lost with no survivors. They notified most of the families in person or via phone, which is better, but some did receive an SMS text message in English or Chinese informing them that the aircraft likely had crashed with no survivors. Let's hear that again, okay?
Yeah, text message.
Families were alerted to their family member's disappearance and subsequent likely death via a fucking SMS text message.
Modern marvels of technology.
I gotta say, that's real fucked up. I get it that that's an easy way to communicate, but come on. Come on. Anyway. Through a 2007 agreement with the Malaysia Airlines, Tzu Chi, who is an international Buddhist organization, immediately sent specially trained teams to Beijing and Malaysia to then give emotional assistance to passengers' families. The airline also sent its own team of caregivers and volunteers and agreed to bear the expense of bringing family members of the passengers to Kuala Lumpur and providing them with accommodation, medical care, and counseling. So I think that is
some good news in all of this.
Yeah, some good work by the airline. Altogether, 115 family members of the Chinese passengers flew from Beijing to Kuala Lumpur. Some other family members chose to remain in China, fearing that they would feel too isolated in Malaysia and also flying after a flight just disappeared.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too keen on jumping on a plane after that, if I'll be honest. I would just want to not be on a plane after that.
Yeah. So on January 29th, 2015, so that's a little less than 11 months after the flight, the Director General of the Department of Civil Aviation Malaysia, Azharuddin Abdul Rahman, announced that the status of Flight 370 would be changed to an accident, in accordance with the Chicago Convention on International Civil Aviation. So by January 29, 2015, they're saying, no, nothing's showing that there's anything that's nefarious. We're going to make this an accident. The theories that I'll talk about later kind of beg to differ against that, though.
Ooh, so you think it was intentional?
There are some theories that do state that they think it was intentional. So search and rescue efforts and, finding of pieces of the plane, because they did find some pieces. Again, they were launched in Southeastern Asia, South China Sea area, but were then moved to the Southern Indian Ocean when the satellite and stuff announced that they actually believe that the plane crashed there based on the communications the satellite had with it. Between March 18th and April 28th of 2014, 19 vessels and 345 military aircrafts searched over 1.8 million square miles of that ocean, with the final phase of the search being a bathymetric survey and sonar search of the sea floor, about 970 nautical miles from southwest Perth, Australia. The search area, which Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott called as close to nowhere as it's possible to be, is renowned for its strong winds, inhospitable climate, hostile seas, and deep ocean floors. So if it crashed there, it's possible that it could have scattered.
And it would be hard to recover the remains because it's going to be hard to get a ship out there that can get people down there for it.
Yeah. March 30th, 2014, Australia's government agency, the Joint Agency Coordination Centre, was established to search for the flight and collaborated with the governments of China and Malaysia. On January 17th, 2017, so nearly 3 years later, the search for Flight 370 was suspended after finding no evidence of the aircraft other than some small marine debris on the coast of Africa. The search had proven to be the most expensive search operation in aviation history, totaling about 155 million US dollars, paid 58% by Malaysia, 32% by Australia, and 10% by China, but again, yielded virtually no evidence. Despite the very little evidence, though, the report was able to show that the location of the aircraft going down likely had been in an area of about 9,700 square miles by using satellite images and debris drift analysis, which is a fascinating form of math that I just...
We'll never understand. You have to be like specialized in that field to even
It's
get
like
any
those,
grasp of understanding.
the physics questions that we would get that were like, if you start here and the river's flowing at this meters per second, like how long does it take to get to the other side, or I don't know, something, or where are you gonna land on the other side?
Except in this case, there's like 30 more million factors you got to worry about.
Yeah, and 9,700 square miles, which is insane, like very intense.
Just a little bit of area,
Yeah.
not too much.
Satellite imagery of the region was analyzed, and several objects of interest and two possible debris fields were identified on images made from the satellite between March 16th and March 26th of, I believe, 2017. None of these possible objects were found by aircrafts or ships, though, or it was in 2014. None of that was ever found, though, by aircraft or ships that searched that area for the following 3 years. About a year after that, the private American marine exploration company, Ocean Infinity, began searching for the flight in the narrowed down area using the Norwegian ship Seabed Constructor. The search was expanded to an area of 43,000 square miles, but was concluded on June 19th, 2018, without any success of finding anything, including debris. In late June of 2014, the next phases of searches were announced, so this is kind of simultaneous to the aircraft and ship searches I was just talking about. It's the underwater search, even though there was previous sonar surveying, this was a more extensive search of underwater. So available bathymetric data for this region was of poor resolution, thus necessitating a survey of the search area before the underwater phase could begin. Commencing in May, the survey charted about 80,000 square miles of seafloor until December 17th, 2014. So about, 7 months of searching? And it was suspended so that the ship conducting the survey could be mobilized in the underwater search instead. This phase of the search used 3 vessels equipped with towed deep-water vehicles that use side-scan sonar, multi-beam echo sounders, and video cameras to locate and identify aircraft debris. A 4th vessel participated in the search between January and May of 2015, using a UAV to search areas that could not be effectively searched using any of the equipment that was on the other vessels.
This is definitely the nightmare of thalassophobia people.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine. Even just like looking at some pictures and stuff and any kind of underwater thing, it definitely freaks me. That's not a fear that I ever thought I would have, but there was this one girl on TikTok who has it, and she would like basically do exposure therapy for herself, and people would recommend things that she would have to look at. So thalassophobia as well as submechanophobia, which is just as, if not more freaky. If you don't know what submechanophobia is, it's basically man-made objects that are underwater. So there's like all kinds of, underwater pools or buildings or freaking construction. Like we have a lake close to where we live that has construction equipment at the bottom of it. like, because it was a man-made lake when they were doing construction in that area, and it was easier just to fill it with water than it was to get any of the construction equipment out from the bottom of the lake. So they just covered it. So like there's certain spaces where you can't swim, and you also can't go too deep.
Good waste of perfectly good equipment.
Yeah, because people have died because they've gotten hooked to.
Yeah, they'll get hooked on that stuff, and
Yeah.
then you can't get out.
Terrifying.
You know what else gets people trapped that I saw recently?
What?
If you dig a hole at a beach.
Oh, okay, you were showing me
You
that.
do not dig deep holes at beaches, people. That is actually seriously dangerous stuff. I watched a video where people were doing it. They had to have about like 15 guys. 15 is over exaggeration. Maybe like 10 people come just to get the kid out of the thing. Because what happens is it'll collapse in on itself. And then you'll be stuck in a trench, a wet trench, and it's almost impossible to get out. It's also how people die, too. Or if somebody's walking in the beach in the late morning or late evening, they will fall in and get trapped and possibly die.
Yeah, so don't be stupid. Don't do that and be stupid, please. That would be nice.
Yeah. They ain't asking for much, people.
So there was discovery of the flaperon on
The what?
it's a piece of one of the plane's wings.
Okay.
That was found near, or it's on an island called Reunion, I think. That's in Australian sea space. And the Australian Transport Safety
Waters.
Bureau, sure. The ATSB reviewed the drift calculations for debris from the aircraft, and according to the JACC, it was satisfied that the search area was still the most likely crash site, so Southern Indian Ocean. Reverse drift modeling of the debris to determine its origin after 16 months also supported the underwater search area, although it needs to be understood that it's incredibly imprecise over long periods of time. Ocean patterns shift a lot, speeds shift, climate change impacts all of that. They can't say for sure certain if the reverse drift modeling would have helped at all or been correct. Ocean floor mapping data collected during the search have been donated to the Nippon Foundation, the Seabed 2030 project, to be incorporated into the global map of the ocean floor, which isn't the topic that we're on, but I did think it was cool nonetheless and thought I should write about it. So it's just interesting. So despite like the horribleness of what happened that made this search of the seafloor possible, there was at least use for information that they gathered from it. In March 2019, in the wake of the 5th anniversary of the disappearance, the Malaysian government stated that it was willing to look at any credible leads or specific proposals regarding a new search. And so by March 2022, so 3 years later, because COVID, Ocean Infinity committed to resuming its search in 2023 or 2024, pending approval by the Malaysian government. In 2023, Ocean Infinity was reviewing data from their previous 2018 search to ensure that nothing was missed. My understanding is that there wasn't anything missed, but they want to reestablish a search of their own to go back through all of those areas with the new technology that had been developed in the 5 years since they had done their initial search. CEO Oliver Plunkett hoped to resume the search in mid-2023 using Ocean Infinity's new Armada vessel. And in March 2024, days before the 10th anniversary of the disappearance, Malaysia said it would consult with Australia about collaborating on another expedition by the Ocean Infinity team. On December 20th, 2024, so 9 months later, the Malaysian government announced that it would resume the search for the flight and that it would be carried out by Ocean Infinity. It was expected to cost another $70 million.
For some reason, I thought you were going to say billion, but I'm like, no way.
No. But as with the 2018 search, this search would be a no find, no fee basis. Meaning if Ocean Infinity didn't find anything, they wouldn't charge the governments anything for the search. Because their whole shtick is like, I'm going to win for you. It's essentially like attorneys who were like, you don't have to pay anything unless I win.
For how much this costs, that's a bold strategy.
What,
Like, holy,
70 million?
yeah, I don't think I would go out on a limb on something like that.
Yeah. On February 25th, 2025, so this year, the Minister of Transport, Locke, I believe that's from Malaysia, confirmed that Ocean Infinity had resumed the search. Subsequently, however, though, on April 3rd, 2025, he then announced that Ocean Infinity had suspended its search, giving the reason that it is not the season, although adding they intend to resume the search at the end of the year, so by December. Who knows if they will? We're not even there yet. So,
It's just crazy. Well, first off, it's crazy that this is over 10 years old now.
I know, right?
It feels so recent.
It does feel so recent. It's
And
crazy.
also it's crazy that they're still searching for it, but I don't think we're going to get any resolution anytime soon.
Nope. So the next information I have for you is possible sightings of the flight by people on the ground the day that it was flying, as well as evidence that has been found from the flight. So the media reported several sightings of an aircraft fitting the description of the missing Boeing 777. A fisherman claimed to have seen an unusually low-flying aircraft off the coast of Kota Baru, while an oil rig worker 186 miles southeast of the Vung Tau claimed he saw a burning object in the sky that morning, which was a claim credible enough for the Vietnamese authorities to send a search and rescue mission. And Indonesian fishermen reported witnessing an aircraft crash near the Malacca Straits. 3 months later, the... How would you say this? Phuket.
Phuket. Phuket.
My initial thought
Phuket.
is fuck it.
I,
Because PH makes an
I
S
know,
sound.
but I think it's different.
It's Phuket?
That's what I'm just going to take. Guess. I doubt it's fuck it.
So the Phuket Gazette reported that a British woman sailing in the Indian Ocean claimed to have also seen an aircraft on fire. So
Oh wait, did the first fisherman stay on fire?
no, that was just simply a low-crying aircraft. But then
The British woman is the one who added the
and
fire.
the oil rig worker.
Sorry, I forgot the oil rig worker.
Yeah.
But on the oil rig worker, it's just one worker saw it, right?
Yep. So who knows how credible that is? Could just be that they wanted some 5 seconds of fame.
Yeah, I mean, you have a lot of ambulance chasers when it comes to these type of events, which is annoying.
Yeah.
Not ideal when you have this.
Yeah, it's the same as when I say, like, whenever I do a true crime case and I say, like, please don't call the tip line with stupid ass tips.
Yeah.
Because I understand you're trying to get your 5 seconds of fame, but you're also blocking people from being able to actually figure out what the hell is going on or get actual information when you decide it's, like, funny to just get your way into the case. Don't do that. Don't be stupid. And friends don't let friends be stupid and do shit like that either, so...
What do you mean? We
Call
ought to
out
be
your friends for
stupid
that.
like that all the time because, God forbid, people actually get some actual help.
Yeah. Wow. We know some people who actually feel that way. So,
What? Like how?
like that people aren't allowed to get help.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a few of them.
Too many, in my opinion, if I'm being honest with you.
I do agree. And if you believe that way, well,
This might not be the podcast for you.
yeah. Hate to break it to you, Chief.
Yeah. Like,
We do kind of care about people here, so if you don't, well,
Yeah.
that's not ideal for you.
And, like, y'all are completely entitled to your own opinions. But that also means that we're entitled to our own opinions. And if we have a platform of any kind, we aren't required to, but it's the best thing for us to be able to use that to spread awareness of the things that we think are important. So, just, heads up for any future episodes or anything, or if this is the first episode you're listening to, and you go back and listen to any of our other episodes, you're going to hear information that tends to have a more, I would say, liberal perspective. But I also work in a field that I'm a therapist. I work in a field where, like, I can't be judgmental towards other people.
Yeah.
I will judge you if you call a tip line with wrong information, but I won't judge you if you fall under any kind of category that's discriminated against. So, anyway, that's my soapbox for the day. Do with that what you will. So, anyway, back to Flight 370. The first item of debris to be positively identified as originating from the flight was that right flaperon. It's a trailing edge control surface, so it's like, well, I believe it's on the side of the plane, but it's like on the back end.
Back of the wing.
Yeah, and I think it's that part that like lifts up.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
It was discovered in late July 2015 on a beach in Saint Andre, Reunion.
I do remember when this happened.
Yeah, it's an island in the western Indian Ocean, about 250 miles. About 250 miles west of the underwater search area. So wasn't a different location than they originally thought because they thought southern Indian Ocean. This was found in western Indian Ocean. So that's a pretty big difference.
This is one of the lighter parts of the plane, so the current could easily take it somewhere else because, the flapper needs to be going up and down, be able to take high wind. So you're talking about something that isn't necessarily the heaviest when it comes to plane-wise.
Yeah, and that is what makes drift analysis so difficult as well.
Yeah, why we are not qualified to ever do drift analysis.
Yep. The flaperon was covered in Lepus antitifera barnacles, which grow in certain patterns and only while underwater. So researchers were able to analyze the barnacles on the flaperon in an attempt to deduce its path to Reunion from where the crash could have been.
Okay, now that's an interesting way. Cool? Yeah.
I think that's so, that kind of stuff is so neat to me. So the item was transferred from Reunion to Toulouse, where it was examined on September 3rd, 2015, so not very long, like only 2 months after it was found, French officials announced the serial numbers found on internal components of that piece of flaperon linked it with certainty to Flight 370. The serial numbers were retrieved using a borescope. They were also able to find a Chinese water bottle and an Indonesian cleaning product in the same area, but unknown whether or not that was connected to anything on the flight, because that could have just been things that were in people's carry-ons or their luggage that we wouldn't have a log of.
Or could be just garbage floating in the ocean, because there's
a lot of garbage in the ocean.
Too much of that right now.
Definitely a lot of garbage in the ocean. In February 2016, an object bearing the words "no step" was found off the coast of Mozambique and could have come from the aircraft's horizontal stabilizer or from the leading edge of the wings, so opposite of the flaperon. Other pieces found were a stenciled code 676EB, which identified it as part of a Boeing 777 flap track fairing, and the style of lettering matched that of the stencils used by Malaysia Airlines, making it almost certain that this piece came from the flight. Because there was likely not any other flights at this time, by this time, that had disappeared and been missing parts of their wings. So I think that's why they can think with certainty it's there. On March 21st, 2016, South African archaeologist Niels Kruger found a gray piece of debris on debris.
I waited for a moment for you to realize that.
Sorry, this is a lot of information. My mouth is tired. You can cut all that out. But on March 21st, 2016, South African archaeologist Niels Kruger found a gray piece of debris on a beach near Mossel Bay, South Africa, that had an unmistakable partial logo of a Rolls-Royce, the manufacturer of the missing aircraft's engines. The Malaysian Ministry of Transport acknowledged that the piece could be that of an engine cowling. An additional piece of possible debris, suggested to have come from the interior of the aircraft, was found on the island of Rodrigues, Mauritius, in late March of that same year, so 2016. On June 24th, 2016, Australian Transport Minister Darren Chester said that a piece of aircraft debris had been found on Pemba Island off the coast of Tanzania. On July 20th, the Australian government released photographs of the piece, which was believed to be an outboard flap from one of the aircraft's wings. So another piece of the wings. Which, like, we can get into it in theories later, but I find it fascinating that a lot of the pieces are only from the wings. I'm assuming, like, if the aircraft caught on fire, I would assume the wings would be the first thing to go because that's where the engines are. Like, isn't that?
So if the engine's caught on fire,
Yeah.
the wings. You said the wings would be first thing to go.
Aren't the
Engines on the wings.
or are those the turbines?
Turbines.
So is the engine inside of the plane? Can you look up the anatomy of a plane? And then we'll come back to that in theories. On November 21st, 2016, families of the victims announced that they would carry out a search for debris in December of 2016.
Those are the engines.
Okay. On the island of Madagascar. On November 30th, 2018, 5 pieces of debris recovered between December 2016 and August 2018 on the Malagasy coast. These were believed by victims' relatives to be from the flight, and they were handed over to the Malaysian Transport Minister, Anthony Loke. By October 2017, 20 pieces of debris believed to be from the flight had been recovered from beaches all over the western Indian Ocean. 18 of the items were identified as being very likely or almost certain to originate from Flight 370, while the other 2 were assessed as probably from the accident aircraft. I believe that those 2 pieces are the Chinese water bottle and the Indonesian cleaning supply, but I'm not certain. Is it possible that it hasn't been found because maybe they're not looking in the right area? Maybe. In May 2024, Dr. Usama Kadri of Cardiff University stated that hydrophone data relating to the flight's crash identified, quote, only a single relatively weak signal within the time frame and location of the official search, unlike the, quote, clear pressure signals shown in previous accidents data that would have such an impact of hitting the water. He also noted that it's implausible to imagine that a significant crash of an aircraft on the ocean surface would fail to generate a discernible pressure signature, suggesting that controlled explosion experiments could almost pinpoint the aircraft's location, or possibly raise the need to reassess the time frame or location currently established by the government analysis.
That sounds very complicated, and I was like trying to follow along with that train of thought.
If people remember what happened with Titan, where the implosion of Titan released, like, it had a sound wave.
Big noise.
What this guy's saying is that during the time, nothing in that area registered a signal large enough to believe that a plane hit the water. So he's saying, like, maybe that's not the area it actually hit in. Is it somewhere else in the Indian Ocean that's out of range of those ones, and we need to look at a different set of signal readers or something like that? But he's saying for a significant crash like this one of a giant Boeing 777, like, hitting the water, it would have made a bigger sound signal, like, signal of hitting the water.
Now, what about if it, like, had slowed down enough when it hit the water?
I think either way, just the sheer size of it.
Okay.
But I'm not sure. It could be that it came down to speed or where it fell from, if it was at the lower altitude.
Yeah, because if it slowed down enough, I mean, it'd still be a decent hit on the water if it stalled, but, like, it wouldn't be as large of an impact is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Texas A&M University mathematics professor Gong Chen has argued that the plane may have entered the sea vertically, so straight up and down, rather than, like, on its belly or on its top, because any other angle of entry would make the aircraft splinter into many pieces, which likely would have been found already. So if it entered vertically, it's possible that the Titanic, the pieces of the plane are basically submerged.
Because the nose would have broken the tension on the water,
yeah,
and allowed it to go
the whole way down.
Yeah.
And sink. And maybe that's why, with the wings being so light, I would say, like, compared to the mass maybe of the center, the wings may have broken off from the tension of hitting the water outside of where the nose hit. or something like that. I don't know. And maybe that's why we're finding mostly pieces of wings. I
Could
don't.
be.
I'm not, you know, someone who understands that kind of stuff. So
Yeah,
this
this
is,
stuff is a bit more,
yeah, way outside my area of expertise. That's for sure.
we're not big brain enough for this.
I might be big brained when it comes to psych, but not when it comes to understanding how planes enter water and explode.
Well, you don't understand the complexities of a plane hitting the water, the sound it makes, and where the parts will be distributed, and what wildlife then may be on those parts when they're distributed across the entire Indian Ocean, an area that is way larger than the continental North America.
And then also able to determine that those specific marine life create a specific pattern when they're growing on things and come from a specific location.
Yep.
No, I cannot do that. So,
Well, that's disappointing. I expected better from you.
wow, thanks. I appreciate that. At the very least, I was able to give you the information. That's all I can do. Sorry, that's your luck. So now we are on to theories. What the
That's what I
heck
went for.
happened to Flight 370? Couple different theories.
All right, hit me with them.
Let me know, and I want to know if you've heard of any of these. Have you heard any theories
I
about?
probably have because I've already listened to a lot and I followed this a lot when it happened.
Okay. So the first theory that came about was a murder-suicide by the pilot. Malaysian police investigated the homes of the both pilots and examined the financial records of all 12 crew members on the flight. According to the preliminary report released by Malaysia in March 2015, there was, quote, no evidence of recent or imminent significant financial transactions carried out by any pilot or any crew member. Additionally, analysis of the pilot's behavior on CCTV revealed no significant behavioral changes over the course of previous flights. Despite this, though, U.S. officials consider it likely that someone in the cockpit of Flight 370 reprogrammed the aircraft's autopilot to head south over the Indian Ocean. Media reports have claimed that Malaysia police identified Captain Zahari as the prime suspect, should human intervention be proven as the cause of the disappearance. In 2020, former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott stated in a Sky News documentary, quote, my very clear understanding from the very top levels of the Malaysian government is that from very, very early on, they thought it was murder-suicide by the pilot. In 2023, retired engineers and pilots Jean-Luc Marchand and Patrick Blelly gave several conferences on the pilot suicide theory, supporting the argument with extensive analysis in a detailed report that they published online, which you can go read yourself, because I was not about to read another giant article or giant report on this flight when I had already read.
When you already read.
When I had already when I had already read so much about this flight. As you can tell by one, probably the length of the episode, and two, the detailed information that I gave you all.
Do you know how long we are right now in this episode?
I have no idea.
We're over an hour.
Well, that's always our goal. Theory is the pilot's flight simulator. This kind of goes along with the idea that maybe the pilot had something to do with it.
Microsoft Flight Simulator.
In 2016, New York Magazine wrote that a confidential document from the Malaysian police investigation showed an FBI analysis of the flight simulator's computer hard drive found a route on Captain Zahari's home flight simulator that closely matched the projected flight over the Indian Ocean, and that this evidence had been withheld from the publicly released investigative report. So they weren't supposed to fly over the southern Indian Ocean. So for him to have a path that almost matches the projected flight that they believe the flight did take, suspicious. So the New York Magazine writes, New York has obtained a confidential document from the Malaysian police investigation into the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 that shows that the plane's captain, Zahari Ahmed Shah, conducted a simulated flight deep into the remote southern Indian Ocean less than a month before the plane vanished under uncannily similar circumstances. The revelation, which Malaysia withheld from a lengthy public report on the investigation, is the strongest evidence yet that Zahari made off with the plane in a premeditated act of mass murder-suicide. The newly unveiled documents suggest Malaysian officials have suppressed at least one key piece of incriminating information, but this is not entirely surprising. There is a history in aircraft investigations of national safety boards refusing to believe that their pilots could have intentionally crashed an aircraft full of passengers. The FBI's findings about the flight simulation were confirmed by the ATSB, but news of the simulation was also confirmed by the Malaysian government, though they reported it as, quote, nothing sinister. I don't know. Seems kind of fishy to me that it matches the flight that they did take, but weren't supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to speak ill of someone who cannot speak for themselves right now. Like, I don't want to. I feel like it's disrespectful to like cling to this idea that it's a mass murder suicide plot when like this is someone's loved one who could have possibly had nothing to do with it, and it's possible we'll just never know, like because we can't find the flight. So very sad. But it's a theory, so I figured I would share because it's a theory. The next one is a power interruption. So at some time between 107 and 203, power was lost to the satellite data unit. The final report stated, quote, it is likely that the loss of communication prior to the diversion is due to the systems being manually turned off or power interrupted to them. Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak said it was clear that the radar transponders in the flight data transmission system were turned off deliberately by someone trying to hide the plane's position and heading. And at 2:25, the aircraft's satellite data unit rebooted itself and then set on that logon request. So they believe that it was turned off for a sinister way, but I didn't really get a whole lot of information about what they believe why or anything like that. Especially if it was only off for like a short period of time, like an hour.
Well, somebody might subtly turned it back on, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, or something like that. Especially like if it's one of the pilots, maybe the other pilot turned it back on without the other one knowing, whatever it may be. The next theory is passenger involvement. So, United States and Malaysian officials reviewed the backgrounds of every single passenger named on the manifest. One passenger who worked as a flight engineer for a Swiss jet charter company was briefly under suspicion as a potential hijacker because he was thought to have the relevant aviation skills.
Well, based on what you said his occupation was,
he would have the skills, but I feel like that doesn't qualify you as necessarily.
Yeah, it puts you suspect because they need to find somebody who has those skills as the suspect.
Do you really need the skills to hijack a plane, though? If you're going to crash it?
I mean, typically for hijack, it's harder to get to the cockpit nowadays and then to understand how things are going. You need some understanding of how the plane operates, especially if you're turning off the communications, or you have a way to force the pilots. But at that point, it's harder to get into a cockpit nowadays ever since 9/11.
I was just going to ask, does that have to do with the hijackings of 9/11?
Yeah, it's a lot harder to get up there.
That makes sense. 2 men, I mentioned them earlier, the Iranian men, were found to have boarded Flight 370 with stolen passports, which raised suspicion in the immediate aftermath of the disappearance of the flight. The passports, one Australian and one Italian, had been reported stolen in Thailand within the preceding 2 years to the flight taking off. The 2 passengers were later identified as Iranian men, one aged 19 and the other 29, who had entered Malaysia on February 28th using valid Iranian passports. They were believed to be asylum seekers, and the Secretary General of Interpol later stated that the organization was inclined to conclude that it was not a terrorist incident. So they entered Malaysia under Iranian passports and then used the stolen passports to try to go over to China so that they would, for asylum seeking from Iran.
No, that's kind of smart, kind of dumb. you can get out of Iran or Iran with your
Oh yeah, sorry.
you can get out of Iran with your Iranian passports. That's not overly too hard, but it's about then getting away from the government there, where you don't want to keep using your same passport back and forth. Because ideally, for asylum seeking, you want to find a Western country. So China's not really the ideal place for asylum seeking, unless they
That's
go to an
fair.
embassy in China of another country,
Yeah,
which would possibly be what they're doing. But what they want to do is they want to, become untraceable after stop number one.
yeah. And also, I apologize for my mispronunciation of Iran. That's my bad. On March 18th, the Chinese government announced that it had checked all of the Chinese citizens on the aircraft and had ruled out the possibility that anywhere involved in the destruction or terror attacks of the plane. Therefore, it's unlikely that it was a passenger on board who hijacked the plane. But again, honestly, we will never know.
Sorry if you guys hear weird noise in the background. That's Atlas licking himself.
Yeah, I was like holding my hand up as if that was going to block any of the sound. But
All right.
he's staring at me. There's two more theories. So the next one is the cargo. So Flight 370 was carrying nearly 24,000 pounds of cargo, with 4 standardized cargo containers of mangosteens, which is a tropical fruit, and 487 pounds of lithium ion batteries, according to Malaysian investigators. And according to the head of Malaysian police, Khalid Abu Bakar, the people who handled the mangosteens in the Chinese importers were questioned to rule out sabotage, as maybe an explosive was in the mangosteens. The lithium ion batteries were contained in a 5,408-pound container being shipped from Motorola Solutions facilities in Bayan Lepas, Malaysia, to Tianjin, China. They were packaged in accordance with the IATA guidelines, but they did not go through any additional inspections at the Kuala Lumpur International Airport before being loaded onto Flight 370. And lithium ion batteries can cause intense fires if they overheat and ignite, which has occurred on other flights and has led to strict regulations on transport aircrafts. So, possible that maybe because it wasn't double checked, that there was an issue, a spark or something ignited, and the lithium ion batteries created an explosion and big fire. Oops. And then lastly, an unresponsive crew or hypoxia. The consensus generally is that there are 3 things that could have happened: an in flight upset or stall, a glide event like an engine failure or fuel exhaustion, or an unresponsive crew or hypoxia event. This concluded, and the consensus concludes that an unresponsive crew and hypoxia event likely best fits the available evidence for the 5-hour period of the flight as it traveled south over the Indian Ocean without communication or significant deviations in its track, likely on autopilot. If no control inputs were made following flameout and the disengagement of autopilot, the aircraft would have likely entered a spiral dive and entered the ocean within 23 miles of the flameout and disengagement of autopilot. And the analysis of the flaperon showed that the landing flaps were not extended, supporting the spiral dive at a high speed theory. In May 2018, the ATSB again asserted that the flight was not in control when it crashed, and its spokesperson added, "We have quite a bit of data to tell us that the aircraft, if it was being controlled at the end, wasn't very successfully being controlled." So that kind of supports the theory that the Texas A&M professor had, where it nosedived in a spiral and hit the water in that direction, because none of the landing gears or anything like that appeared to be out, per evidence of the flaperon that they found. So I know that was a lot of information that I just threw at everybody. What are your thoughts, Frank, on the missing Malaysia Airlines flight?
I I don't really know. I've been back and forth on what I believe over the years, and I don't really know what's the best at this point. I'm gonna be honest. I'm very indecisive on this one. I followed it a lot a while back, and I just don't know. I mean, the fact that part of the stuff was deliberately turned off, I would lead to something maybe one of the two pilots.
Hmm.
But why and what they did, I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair.
You never know what's going to happen. I mean, it was sometime in the 2010s, I believe, there was a French pilot who decided to just fly a plane into a mountain and kill everybody. So you just never know.
Yeah. You do never know, and we probably will never know unless the actual aircraft itself is found, which is devastating. So,
Yeah.
but so that's what I have for you today. Again, I know that was a really long episode. It took me a long time to research it. And also, again, apologies for any mispronunciations that I had throughout any of it. I am unfortunately a white woman in east coast of PA, or east coast of the country, but in Pennsylvania, and that I cannot pronounce everything correctly. So just know that. And also, sorry if things were a little bit out of order or confusing. I did my best to try to put it in the orders that made sense or grouped by things that made sense together. So,
This is just such a large one. I'll be honest. There are times I got lost, but like I know the gist of this beforehand. I've listened to
yeah,
podcasts. I mean I was 16 at the time when this happened, and I followed it along for like 2 years pretty well. So
yeah. The
I
gist is
just
that it disappeared.
yeah
We have very little debris evidence from it, and we've never found the plane.
yeah we know for a fact it hit the ocean.
Yeah, pretty much. So,
I know there was actually I don't think you talk about this theories that that the army took it or it landed at an army base or stuff like that.
I didn't read those anywhere.
Oh,
So
okay,
it's possible
those.
it just wasn't
But
on.
that was before they found the debris. That some people were like, "What if it landed at this army base or was hijacked or like warplanes came out and made it escorted to so and so
Yeah,
they can hold them hostage?" But like, it's unlikely.
yeah. So anyway, that's all I got. If you want to wrap us up?
All right, we're sitting at probably like an hour 20 minutes at this point. Actually, no, an hour 15, I think, at this point.
Are you
So
done?
what I just said. Yeah. I'm leaving that because I'm going to say, well, if you're still here at this long, knowing
Oh,
that there's no more to the story, thank you. We really appreciate you guys listening. If you're really liking what you're listening to, follow us, like, comment, review, subscribe, rate, whatever you're on. Every 5-star rate we get really helps boost us in the algorithm. We like it every time. Just keep those up. We greatly appreciate that, guys. And if you're really also liking it, spread the word of it to others. And then go check us out on our socials, our Instagram, our Blue Sky we don't use, and the TikTok I'm still trying to figure out. And yeah, that's about it that I have for the wrap up stuff. So you ready to sign us off? And remember,
to look for
the unknown
the unsolved.
and the unseen.
Thanks for
Bye,
listening.
guys.
Don't be afraid of planes.